Apologize for being late. I spent yesterday evening in Dodge City giving a program out there and got home and did not read my planner correctly as far as the time. I thought it was later on today, so I appreciate you hanging around here. I want to apologize again for my delay, but we'll share some insights today and talk about planning for the future and transitioning the farm. A little bit about me. Again, I'm Dwayne Hund. I live here in Paxico. I've worked for K-State since 1985, so I'll be starting my 33rd year here in a couple of months. And during that period of time, I was originally hired to help farm families look at their finances and help them get through the crisis that we were all a part of back in the 80s. If you were farming or ranching or lived in a farm, you were part of that. Then through the 90s, I began working on other objectives, one of which was to focus on transition planning. It seemed like in my work with farm families there back in the 80s and early 90s that a lot of potential problems could be remedied by looking at a transition or bringing in another generation to help strengthen that operation and give it new life. And so I've become real interested in that. Dr. Rodney Jones was at K-State many years back in that time. He and I collaborated a lot on this. We learned off and on how to proceed with a lot of these, and we developed what's called the 12 steps for families to go through when their transition planning is important and workable for their situation. So talk a little bit first about family businesses. They're complicated structures. You know, you've got this family personal system with the farm, ranch, you've got an ownership system, and you've got a management system. And what's important about all of those is they all overlap. So it makes it difficult sometimes to sort out exactly where you are in that circle. Some members of the family may be more into the family personal system, somebody may be more into the management system, and a third party may be into the ownership system. They can all have a lot of ideas and things that they want to interject in this process, but that doesn't mean that they're not on board for what we're trying to do. Productivity in the day-to-day operations is what's critically important. Family business succession. How many of you are operating operations that you're in your third generation? How many of you are third generation operation? Any fourth generation? Okay. And that's kind of typical, and for most of us, you know, 30% of the operations make it to the second generation, 15% to the third, but only 5% make it to the fourth generation. I live on a ranch and a farm there, Paxico, along I-70, and I'm the fifth generation of that operation. I don't think my two boys are going to be interested in it. They pursued other careers and finance and so forth, but I have a grandson that appears to be interested. He could skip a generation. He could be the seventh generation to operate our operation in Wabunsee County. That's very rare. It's not typical. And there's lots of challenges that have to be overcome. We have to develop a shared sense of purpose and direction. We've got to have consensus regarding objectives and goals. And economic realities have to be implemented, and decision-making structures and legal structures, and then growth and development. We know that when we bring the next generation in, we generally have to make room in the business for them. You know, we can't cut the pie only so far and have it be spread around to where it'll accommodate everybody involved. So family business succession has a lot of challenges. Goal and consistency is probably the number one. When I sit down with fathers and sons and talk about bringing in the next generation, one of the main things that I like to do is see what their goals are. Now, what's the son usually like to do when he enters an operation? What's the first thing he wants to do?
Spend. Get bigger.
Yep, spend some of Dad's money. He's got ideas. I enjoy every fall of the year. I give 2 different lectures to the animal science graduates at K-State that are going back to the ranch and the farm. Dr. Carol Fike has me do that. Then I make individual visits with them on another day where I spend 20 minutes with each of those individuals and get to the heart of where they're at. And this is the main thing I tell them to be working on, is that being consistent in your goals with the retiring generation can promote a lot of strength in your ability to make that happen. And if you're having conflicts, it's because you haven't done this. And it's interesting to see the number of kids that have it already figured out, and then a few of them go, well, I'm going home and Dad's retiring and I'm taking over. I go, well, that'll probably happen. How old is Dad? Dad's 59. Are you sure it's going to happen right away? Well, I believe so. Well, we might want to rethink that a little bit. There's a lot of touchy subjects. You know, fairness and equality is important, and that communication needs to be developed very strongly. And to that extent, besides the farm analyst team, which I'll give you more insight on a little bit, we have facilitators now that are trained, that are in different areas of the state, that can come out and help you and your family discuss these issues and do so in an informed way to help you make progress on them. As I'm going to run through this pretty fast, but communication and conflict resolution are both important. Planning is the process. We need to devise workable plans and implement and monitor those plans. And strategic planning is visioning. You know, we've got to have the same long-range outlook. We're going to do something today that's going to affect us next year, but some of those decisions can be long-range decisions, and we have to be aware of what they are and how that's going to fall into play. Dad may be 60 years old today and plans on taking his Social Security at 66, but between now and then, he may not want to slow down. He may say, well, I've got some debts to pay off, I want to keep going. And son says, well, I want to grow in my business too, and we can figure out a way to make that compatible with for both of them. Then we come up with a good plan, we hope. We need to understand our values, and you know, we should be inspired. We want something to work. We want our sons and our daughters. I've had several instances where we're bringing in the daughter and the son-in-law and making them part of the operation, and that's fun. You know, we want to unite the stakeholders in there. Who's part of the stakeholder group? We got Dad, we got Mom, we got the son, maybe his wife. Who else is in that stakeholder group? Well, certainly those non-farm siblings become part of that stakeholder group. They may not be actively engaged in any of the operations, but they certainly are part of the ownership system, potentially. And we have to recognize that. The size, scope, and composition of what we do and provide a foundation for the plan that requires involvement of all those stakeholders. It's very helpful if they're involved. Visions versus missions. You know, our mission is to achieve profitability, to achieve growth, to do well at what we do. Our vision is how do we get there. We know what the mission is and we know what we want to do, but we have to have the vision to figure out how we step that direction. A common example of where vision and mission are somewhat confused is someone tells me that they have in mind to build a college fund for their kids when they reach that age, but they're not doing anything today and haven't done much in the past to get there. And the kids are getting a little, every year they advance another grade and they're not making progress. So there's a disconnect there when we think about our mission, but what is our vision for getting there? And I'm going to skip over this. I like this. This is the vision statement. This really speaks to what we are. And I've seen some very successful operations put together their own vision statement, go to a supply store like Staples or someplace like that, have it in a nice printout, and they put it above the door in their shop, or they put it in their office, and they focus on what is our vision that we're going to do, and what is it that we want to be about. Now, it seems kind of fluffy, I know, but it's really not. It's something that kind of speaks to the heart of what it is we're trying to achieve and what it is we're wanting to do. So that mission statement can be written similar to this. We want to be recognized as reliable community citizens, neighbors, stewards of the environment. We base decisions on the best available science. We want to be high-quality producers of grain and cattle, and we want to sustain the family farming environment while targeting at least an 8% return on investment and 4% equity growth rate. That's a little tough to do today, but it's doable over a long term. That says a lot in a few paragraphs about what this operation needs to do, and get everybody to thinking about that. When you make daily decisions, are you on track? Is that what you're doing? Is that where you're going? Goal setting is very important. We can have an objective, for instance, to increase gross income per acre. The goal might be to average our soybean yield. Hopefully, maybe we get 50 bushels per acre next year, or this year. So our objective for a successful family business going to the next generation is to schedule succession planning family meetings each month this year and work with our team of advisors, whoever we need on there, to get something in writing to make it happen. So let's talk specifically about the 12 steps, and you all have a copy of that in front of you. I wrote the draft on this, and then Dr. Shirley and Dr. Jones modified it, and it was a real work in progress because it took us several years to come to the idea of how this should be done. Now, the first thing you think about when you talk about succession and transition planning, what's the first thing that pops in your mind that you want to do? Dennis, I'm going to pick on you. What's the first thing you think ought to be done?
Smooth and orderly transition.
And specifically, do we go see the lawyer? Is that the first thing we do?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Good answer. The point is, a lot of people jumped into that thinking that's all we need to do. Junior's coming home. He's going to graduate in May from K-State. Mom and I are going to go to the attorney. We're going to put together an estate plan and get it done, and we'll be ready. Well, I submit that's not the right place to start. In fact, it's step number 11. We got a whole lot of things we need to go through before we get to that step. And I want to take you through this real quickly here so you can understand what I'm talking about. What matters most? When I sit down with families, the working parents and the son and the daughter-in-law, they have a common goal. They want to continue that operation, obviously. They want to continue it. They have a feeling of need to pursue that legacy and make it happen. That may not be in the same venue as what the other stakeholders, those off-farm heirs, they may not have that same feeling. They may think that the farm is just something to work with, that preserving the legacy maybe isn't that important. So I always have people sit down when we're in this process, when I'm working with families, and I go, what matters most to you? Give me 3 things that matters most to you. Is it stewardship, continuing the legacy? Does it have anything to do with a way of life, culture, for raising a family? You know, what are those things that are most important to each of us that we fall back on? The reason this is very important is because it supports a lot of decision making as we go up the ladder here. And if we have a common goals and a common feeling about what matters most, when we hit a rough spot, we can back up and say, but remember, we all wanted the legacy to continue. And it helps us bring it back around and focus, because sometimes we get off track a little bit. So values are important, and we have to make sacrifices sometimes for our business, because it requires a lot of diligence, as we well know. We want to desire to maintain a legacy. We have core values, things that are very important to us. I see these signs on kitchen walls and a lot of offices now where it says faith, family, and farm in that order. Now, I can attest to the fact there's been times in my life that I haven't put them in the right order. I've done some things that probably I put them in the wrong order. I thought this was more important than that. And it's easy to fall in between the cracks sometimes, but the bottom line is those core values is where we come from. And a lot of people identify that very clearly. So our next one is identify our hopes, needs, and fears. And I threw this in there because sometimes we can take a step backwards when we don't expect to. And obviously this guy didn't realize that he had it in reverse, and before he knew it, he climbed up that bin full of corn. But yeah, you need to identify the difference between forward and reverse. So identifying wants, needs, hopes, and fears. This is a process where we sit down when we've got all the family members there, the in-laws and the outlaws and everybody, and we get around the table and we talk about what do I want to have happen with this transition, what do I need to have happen, what do I hope happens, and what am I worried about, what are my fears. We've done this exercise several times at seminars over the years, and we generally separate the dads in one room, the moms in one room, the successors in one room, and then the supporters, the in-laws, in the other room. And we have them answer this question. Then we come back together and we find out what the differences are. Would you expect there to be much differences in those 4 categories? Surprisingly, there's not as many as you might think. Most of them are about on the same page. Now, they have vicious arguments sometimes about it, but when the whole thing clears up and the dust settles, they're all pretty much on the same page. They just don't realize it sometimes because they're talking more than they're listening. And that's where facilitators and people that can help pursue the process with them really help out. Communication is vital. Exploring the concerns. Yeah, there can be some fears. We need to know what they are. Maybe there's more debt there than what this farm can handle with Junior coming in and with his ideas of things he wants to spend money on to do. And we better figure out how that's going to work. I'll give you an example. I was given a program a number of years ago down in southeast Kansas. Afterwards, this rancher come lumbering up to me and he said, "You know, son, I really like what you had to say, but I need your help." And I said, "Well, fine, what can I do for you?" He says, "I need you to come out and fix my son." I said, "You want me to fix your son?" "Yeah, the kid's got this idea we're going to spend $100,000 trading combines, and I told him we're not going to do that. It ain't going to happen." He said, "For the last 6 months we've been arguing with one another over this." He said, "I'm just fed up with it. Would you come out and straighten him out?" I said, "Okay." So 2 weeks later, I come to the farm. Dad meets me at the door. I meet him again, and I walk in, and the son's there. He's got the table all set up with his Excel spreadsheets. He's got it all planned out how we can trade combines and spend $100,000 and make this work. I told Dad, I said, "Let's sit down here and think about this for a minute. What I'd like you to do, I'll give you each piece of paper." And I said, "I want the son and the dad to sit down, write a number on that paper that tells me how much they can afford to risk and lose and still maintain a viable farm operation." So they each wrote some figure down on the paper. They folded them, they gave them to me, and I kind of squished them around just for a little bit of suspense. I opened them up. The first one said $100,000. Second one said 0. I thought, well, I'm not getting very far here. What were they arguing about? Were they arguing about a combine? No, they weren't arguing about a combine. They were arguing about risk. That combine was their focus, but they had not agreed on the underlying problem, and that was the risk that this decision was going to make. Within 30 minutes, we had a solution on the table that satisfied both of them. The son got his combine, and Dad got what he wanted, no risk. What did we do? Now, I ask this question in a lot of places. About half the time, I get somebody that comes up with the answer.
But at least,
What's that?
at least the combine.
Bingo. Did lease. Now, they both looked at me like they felt dumber than a box of rocks, but the fact is they spent so much time arguing and fussing with each other about the issue of the combine that they failed to think about what are some underlying ideas that we can come up with that will make this work. And a lease purchase was the way to go. And I followed up with the son, and he took out a 5-year lease on that combine, and he paid it off in 3 years, and he was happy as a clam, and Dad was okay. But for 6 months they argued, and it affected everything they did together, because it was just like a sore on the bottom of your foot. Every time you took a step, you knew it was there. And sometimes it just takes a third party to walk in and say, "Clear the air, and let's think about this." And there's a way for both parties to achieve what they need. So sometimes exploring concerns and having everybody participate is a primary issue, and facilitation is really helpful. Okay. So step number 3, establish the visions, statements, and goals. And we spent a little time on this. So vision is critical. We need a guiding philosophy. That's where that mission statement flows in. Goals need to be specific, and we need to have deadlines that are measurable and attainable. I'm 61, so I know I've been through this for the last 30-some years. I started at the end where a lot of guys were coming into farming, and I'm at the other end now, where some that hung you with a little gray hair along with I are at the same page. And I understand how important it is to achieve some things, but I have several people over the years that say, we know we need to do estate planning, but we just don't find time to do it. We just don't get it done. And unless you establish a timeline and say, we will have this done by this date, it just kind of slides along until what happens? Until something serious happens health-wise, and then maybe it's too late. Or maybe the issue come up and you pass the health scare and you've decided. I've had people come to my place and knock on my door and say, "We're ready to do something." And I said, "Well, that's great. Do you have any background?" And they said, "Yeah, we've been to 4 of your talks before, and we understand a lot of it, but yet we don't, and we need some help." And one of the things I try to do as much as I can is I take families and I go to the attorney with them and sit down and talk about everything, and so that when you walk out of there, you feel like you know where you're at, and I collectively can help you put together your estate plan to meet your needs and so forth. So, but I know what it's like. It's very intimidating to walk in that attorney's office and hear all this jargon, and you're going to do this, we can do that, we can do a life estate, we can do a trust, and da-da-da. You walk out there and your head's just swimming, you know. It's really, kind of helpful to have somebody else maybe go through that again with you and identify the things that are the objectives for your goals to achieve. So, human resource evaluation. This is an interesting subject. I've run into situations where people are in the wrong positions. The example was I had a farm up in Smith County a number of years ago where Dad had me come, and they were failing financially. Their neighbors around them were doing all right, but they were going backwards, and they didn't know why. After spending a couple hours with them, it was very clear to me that that son who'd been working there for the last 12 years was a cowman. He didn't like to farm. He only wanted to farm maybe to raise some feed. His goal in life was to have cows. Well, where they were, they had limited pasture resources, and they could only have about 100 cows. That kid loved cows. He wanted to be a cowman. So we talked it over. They did some investigations. They found a ranch down in the southern Flint Hills that they could lease. Set the son up down there with about 300 cows. And within 4 or 5 years, the profitability of the operation increased dramatically, because the son was getting to do what he was wanting to do. He wasn't being forced into maintaining a farm. Now that legacy was in Smith County. But a few years later, they bought that ranch on a contract in the southern Flint Hills and transferred that legacy there. So a legacy is part of who we are as much as where we are. And I like people to understand that, you can maintain a legacy by owning it. You don't have to operate it. And I've seen some people that have a legacy farm inherited that have lost it. Have you ever seen that happen? Do you ever know anybody that's inherited something and turned around and lost it financially? How does that happen? Well, part of it has to do with the fact that we're here, but we're not in the right seat on the bus. We're in the wrong place. And I've helped some people actually get out of farming and ranching when they discovered that it was all right to admit that I shouldn't have been here. This is something great-grandpa, grandpa, and dad did, but it isn't in me to do it. And so that's important. Successor may have different strengths, as I mentioned, and communicating desires and skills of the successor is important, and hired help, how we manage those, is critical. So who's in charge? Well, I look at this one and I wonder, who in the heck got stuck first? Maybe you've seen this picture before, it's been at Farm Journal. There is a spray rig back there that got stuck, and then a tractor tried to pull him out, and then another tractor. And, well, we see there's help coming over here. The big crane's going to come in and take him in. But I wonder if anybody wants to claim responsibility for that deal. How many times have we been sucked into something? I mean, this is a good deal. We ought to do this. And you jump before you analyze, and you wish you wouldn't have after the fact. So sometimes these things happen. So who's in charge? Retiring generation hates mistakes. I had a guy tell me one time, he was from Iowa, he said, I'll let my son go far enough in his decision making that he skins his legs, but I won't let him break them. I'll let him go far enough that he may make some mistakes and get skinned up, but I'm not going to let him go so far that he ends up really hurting himself. We're talking about financially, of course. But we hate to see him make mistakes, but guys, we've got to let our sons try some new things once in a while. If you keep them bottled up, they'll just shrink away. So, but it has to be done in a way that manages the viability of the farm without stressing it too much. And so, I pay tuition every year. I think we all do. We market grain, we market our cattle, we plant hybrids, we do certain things based on the best ideas we got, and if we'd have known a little more, we might have changed our minds and did it a little different. And I always call that paying tuition. Every year we end up learning, we should learn something every year about how to do better. Letting go of the reins, I just mentioned tuition. Organizational chart now and in the future is really important to kind of get people on the same path. Where do we stand financially? I had a young man listen to my talk up at K-State, the Animal Science Department, and 3 years later he called me and he said, I remember one of the things that you told us, and that was from the business end, and before I got involved financially, being a partner with my dad, I needed to know what the financial status was of our farm. He said, Dad won't tell me. He said, now you've informed Dad that you're not asking for his personal information, we're just looking at the farm. He said, yeah, I've gone through it round and round with him, and he will not share his financial information on the farm. He says, I can be a partner, and I can be a part of the operation, but he won't show me the balance sheet, how much debt we got, how much assets we got, he won't do it. I told him, you better walk away. If you don't have the comfort and the ability with your son to share that information, then you're not developing a partnership. You're developing something different than that. And there's a problem there, and it needs to be recognized. And so I advise young people, don't go there. It's not in your best interest. You're liable to be sad when the outcome comes along. Of course, we need to know if there's another room, first of all, for the partner that's coming in. Full disclosure, as I mentioned, risk management of potential hazards is important, and you need to manage the 3 Ds, death, disability, and divorce. The 3 Ds, death, disability, and divorce. Anytime we're looking at a business structure, we need to figure out how we can manage those things. Death can be managed, of course, with life insurance. Disability, the same way. And divorce, well, that gets a little more tricky. Do farm people get divorced? Yeah. Statistically, not as much as our city cousins do, but there's a significant amount of divorces that occur on farms and ranches. I've had several over the years where the attorneys have recommended that a couple come to me that are in the middle of a divorce. The wife says, look, my objective here is to see what I can take away from this operation for my share because I helped build this, but I don't want to take so much as to make it impossible for our son to take over, and it would jeopardize the operation. She looks at me and she says, you tell me with my ex-husband, soon-to-be ex-husband sitting here, what it is that we can split up and still keep this farm viable. That's an interesting afternoon to spend doing that. And I've had that conversation several times over the years, and you know, it says a lot about the spouses recognizing that their love for each other may end and the divorce may need to happen, but it doesn't mean it has to be the end of the farm. Number 7. That's a strange occurrence, isn't it? Do we have what we need? Well, this guy thought everything was fine until the sinkhole developed in his cornfield. Would you see that coming? Lauren, would you see that coming? I wouldn't. You know, that corn stick, and all at once you go, well, what the heck happened here? Yeah, that's a nasty thing. Those kind of things can happen, though, and we have to be prepared just in case. So do we have what we need? Well, inventory of resources, land, and buildings is important. Can a new venture be started and created? And retiring generations may have to retire to create room for the successor. I've had several instances where Dad takes his Social Security and improves the income for him and his wife, and therefore more of the assets can be turned over, more of the farm ground or the cows can be turned over to that next generation and help them grow their operation. So, and investments may be required to add income. You know, there's probably things that we are going to have to invest in to make it happen. Internal and external factors, SWOT. This is an exercise where if you are looking at a major decision, like purchasing that farm next door or dramatically expanding your livestock herd, you need to go through this process of SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Look at every decision that's large enough to merit this and have your family sit around the table and let's identify what are the strengths of this potential situation, what are the weaknesses, what opportunities can we create, and what are the threats, and how do we manage those. If you clearly understand each of those and develop them, you'll find out that you may or may not want to take on this particular opportunity. But this is a method to help get there. And when building a farm game plan, never fail to analyze your opponent. I had a young man ask me after a program I did up in Jewell County here a while back. He said, "What do you mean by your opponent?" Well, what are we talking about? We're all competing together. You're raising soybeans, I am. You're raising cattle, I am too. So the bottom line is we need to know what our benchmarks are for our operation. Benchmarks tell us that typical, K-State has this data. How many of you have measured your operation against the data that K-State has to figure out where you rank? If you're a farm management member, hopefully you get some of that data, but it's there. It's available on the agmanager.info website where you can sit down and benchmark your operation and see what your strengths are. And a lot of times when I'm helping analyze operations, it's as much of looking at what is going wrong as it is going right. Because if we can figure out how to get rid of the dead wood in the operation and dissect it and figure out what's really working and emphasize that and drop some things that aren't working, we can have a remarkable improvement in profitability in many cases. Evaluating financial feasibility. This is where I come in specifically. I run a program called FinPack, Financial Package. What it is it builds balance sheets and budgets for each individual crop enterprise and livestock enterprise. In fact, we'll take the livestock enterprises and we'll dissect them into cow, calf, and weaning, and we transfer the weaning calf to a growing budget. If that's what we're doing, we grow it and background it, we may graze it, and then we may finish it. All those steps are carefully analyzed separately from one another because we're trying to help you figure out where's your greatest opportunity for profit. Where can you make the best opportunity to work and really strengthen your operation? And so evaluating financial feasibility requires good comprehensive financial statements, budgeting each enterprise, do the cash flow planning to figure out how it will come out, and FinPack provides that financial roadmap. I've got a number of people, about 43 now, that I work with every year, and the goal is to give them a roadmap to go on for the next year. I had a guy tell me here a while back, he said, I worked with him about 18 years. He said there was 1 year, 2 years ago, he didn't call me for an appointment, and he felt lost that whole year. He says, I just didn't have a clear feeling that I was on the right track. And he's a pretty good sized farmer. He's out in Lincoln County and farms about 4,000 acres. So decisions are critical, and that's it. So developing a business plan. The bankers like to see this for good reason. They want to know not only how you're focusing on the profitability of what you're going to try to do when you come in to ask for a loan to expand or do something, but how is this going to work for the whole family? You know, effectively communicates the plan to lenders, partners, and family, documents viability, demonstrates purpose, and this is an excellent website. It costs nothing, but University of Minnesota developed this, and it's agplan.umn.edu. If you want to Google that and go look at that sometime, it has a good template to work through and to build a financial plan for your operation. And really helps the youngsters get a handle on it. So I would encourage you to have a look at that sometime when you're on the internet. Go to www.agplan.umn for University of Minnesota.edu. It's a good site. It gives you examples and it helps you go through that process so you can figure out what your business plan should look like. Well, we finally made it to step 11, and didn't take that long, but here we are. We're ready to put some things in writing. Yeah. Estate planning, retirement planning, and business entity buffet. Sometimes part of our goals in estate planning and transition planning may involve creating a different entity. Many of you are sole proprietors. How many of you are involved in another type of entity like a general partnership? Anybody involved in, have any LLCs, limited liability companies? Okay, we got one of those. Limited liability partnerships is another one. Any S-Corps? Any corporations in there? Got one. And C-Corps, of course, would be the final one. So those are all entities that could be available, or I mean they're available, that could be chosen to meet specific needs, not only through an estate planning process, but also for the purpose of helping that business grow and be viable. So estate planning has to be addressed. I've had situations where I get a call, it always seems to come from the daughter-in-law. She's usually the one that calls. I call her the canary in mine, you know, when something's not right, she's the one that usually calls. And it goes something like this. My husband has been farming with his parents for 22 years, and his parents are in their 80s, and we still have no idea what's going to happen to this farm when they pass on. And we've been here all this time. They have helped mom and dad build their wealth. We see a lot of 80-year-old, I got 4 of them in a 5-mile radius of where I live, that are 80 years old plus and have no parent successors. But even if they did, they're growing their operations and so forth, the ones that do, and what's going to happen with that? If you're an only child, it's a moot point, but if you have siblings that are out in other areas, it's going to be potentially an issue. And you know, you put a lot of years into that, and how do we get that back? How do we get recognized for that? That's the issue. So we have to address this, and of course our goal always should be to minimize taxes. Now the way current federal estate tax is set up, we each can have $5.5 million of assets at our death and not trigger any federal estate taxes. There's no Kansas estate tax anymore, but that's the federal side. So $5.5 million, or for a couple, a mom and a father, $11 million. Is what we could have in fair market value upon our deaths that we could pass to our heirs with no federal estate taxes. Now, out of all the farms I work with every year, that covers about 99% of them. I do have 2 of them that are larger than that. One's $37 million and another's $25 million. And they're already doing things to minimize the effects of the estate taxes on their businesses. But most of us, that $11 million kind of helps fit. We're not in the Corn Belt where ground's 10,000 an acre or more, but it still is something to consider, minimizing taxes. And knowing what the future may hold, that's the most critical thing here. You know, it's hard to make decisions in a vacuum, and our kids, you know, when you've been there 22 years, that son was 44 years old. And he needs to know, for the viability of his wife and his kids, what's going to happen. It's only the right thing to do. And dads, we need to make sure that we do this. It's just critical that we get a hold of that and do the right thing. We need security for all parties. I mean, dads need the security too of knowing that their assets are going to be there for them for the rest of their lives, and take care of the surviving spouse. That's all part of this. And minimizing conflict between between heirs that are on and off the farm is another critical issue. So many of the times, those off-farm heirs don't really know what's going on. Another example, I had a family over by Junction City a number of years ago that we had a formal mediation because Dad was headed to a nursing home. Mom had taken care of him as long as he could at home. And the kids all had a big group. There were 7 children in this family. The youngest son was farming. And the kids all thought, well, Junior's farming the ground. He can pay for Dad's nursing home care. And so we got together and sat down and started to talk about this. And I was explaining to the 2 older sisters, who were nurses, by the way, who lived in Kansas City, that crop share of the way they had it arranged was going to give them so many dollars of income per year. And the sister looked at me and she says, well, I understand they're getting a crop share, but she says, don't they get cash rent too? And I said, no, it's either one or the other. Well, they had it in their head that the son should be paying, or brother should be paying cash rent as well as giving mom and dad a share of the crop. Well, they just completely, and the son sat at the end of the table and I could read his lips. He said, now you know what I've been going through. So we straightened that out, and the whole family agreed, well, you know, their expectations were misaligned. They just didn't know. They had improper information and assumed something that wasn't feasible. So they had a big hug fest at the end of the day and felt better about things. But coming into there, that was an issue. They just thought their little brother should be able to generate enough income to take care of Dad's needs. And entity choices is a whole other subject we could spend an hour on at least, but I won't do that today. But it is something. Now, putting the plan into action. Here's the last step, step 12. We need a timeline, whether it be estate planning, whether it be a different business entity. We need a timeline of how we're going to achieve this and on what it's going to be. if dad's 60 and he wants to work at the same level he is until he's 65 or 66, whatever it is, how he can get his full Social Security, then that becomes our timeline. If dad's 75 and he doesn't want to let go of the reins and the son's approaching middle age, then we need to have a discussion about, is that in dad's best interest to do that? You know, is he training his successor well? I had a county agent call me a number of years ago, and I went clear out to Kensington. This son's father had passed away, and he was in his 80s. The son was 52, had no idea how to set the planner. Dad had never let him do that. He had no idea how to set the planner to put on the right seating rate. All he did all those years was exactly what Dad told him. His dad never let him make a decision. He was lost. He was a 42-year-old kid that was completely lost. And that was, you know, we need to do better in some cases. So promises need to be kept, and respect for the retiring generation is important. Sometimes sons are they kind of bully their dads. I've seen that. I've seen sons that are too demanding and don't take care of the fact that they don't respect their dads to the degree they should. I have actually, on occasion, a couple of times, stopped a meeting, took the son aside, and basically told him that what he was doing to his dad was not favorable, that he was lucky to have what he had here, and he needed to respect his dad. And bring him kind of back from wherever he was to reality. That you know, Dad's created something here, but you're here by choice, and you can leave by choice too. So sometimes sons get a little bit too demanding, but most of the time we can discuss this, talk it out, and allow management to be passed to the next generation. So in summary, transitions will happen one way or the other if accomplished with effective communication, formal business planning. The result can be an operation that's highly competitive and will enable another generation to come on board. That's what we want to have happen, right? That's our goal. Okay. I did that in a little less time than I normally do, but I'm open for any questions or comments. Tell me about your thoughts about this process and things that you'd like to learn more about. And don't jump in or I'll pick on you. Dennis, what do you think about this process?
Ideal.
What did you say about
One of the things I think that people think about right off the bat is how do we get started? You know, but many of you have started already. How many of you have another generation already working in your operation? Yeah. And you got two of them.
Two generations.
Two generations.
I'm the third one.
Really? So, got a grandson or your father?
I got a son and two grandsons.
Two grandsons. That's awesome. Yeah. Does it get a little complicated once in a while?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Once in a while, words fly.
Yeah.
But in a few minutes, they talk it out and they go on. So
And sometimes we can do that, and sometimes somebody feels like they're always losing the argument, and pretty soon
they settle up pretty much themselves.
they've been able to do that. That's great.
I stay out of it.
Well, you know, sometimes the leader, the best thing they do is to be on at the side, kind of coaching a little bit, not be out there demanding, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. Some of the best leadership I've ever seen comes out of people that know how to skirt the ends and kind of motivate. That's what I consider to be a true leader. And there needs to be a leader in every farm. I've got an Amish operation I work with in southeast Kansas. There's 7 kids in this operation. The second oldest daughter is the leader of the operation. She is phenomenal. She has skills that are just terrific. And she does the analysis. I sit down with her. I spend 2 full days working her through her plans because it's that complicated. And she's always eager to look at a new option and so forth. But what she does more than anything is she motivates her brothers and her mom and her dad to look at things and make sure they analyze it thoroughly before they jump in. They recently bought a local hometown locker business, and they have a poultry processing facility, so that may give away what I'm talking about, because there's not many of them in the state of Kansas. They raise free-range chickens, they raise geese ducks, they just do so many things. But it boils down to one thing: what motivates them, what gets them next week is that young lady is a leader, a true leader that can help motivate people to achieve things. So in your operation, You know, it's very important you figure out who the best successor is when you go forward. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean it all falls on the hands and the back of the oldest son. It may not be the right choice. In this case, she's got two older brothers, but she is really the true leader, and they recognize that. Well, I think that's pretty neat. And I try to help families that have those kind of operations maybe sort it out and figure out who is going to be the best person to lead this into the next generation. So, as you can tell, I get really excited about this because I found that we're helping so many families stay on board instead of just allowing mom and dad to retire and nobody takes that farm over, and pretty soon it's absorbed by another one. And so many of these towns and communities, particularly as we go west into Kansas, are drying up. And if we can just keep another family there for another generation, not only do we strengthen that community, but we strengthen the services it provides, hospitals, the grocery stores, the things that they need. You know, it's just critical. And we try to keep as many of these young people going as possible. And there's opportunities there. Right now it's pretty tough, but would you say that this is a bad time to be investigating and going in, bringing in a successor, or what would you think about that? Is this a bad time?
It's not the greatest of times, I know that.
This could be an
I'm
opportunity.
going back to the same one you had up there a while ago, making your acre produce a profit. Probably about bushel of corn or an acre of corn and probably make a profit on it this day and age. I don't think it's possible.
And
We haven't figured it out yet anyway.
And in some cases, it is. And it just depends on a lot of factors that are involved for each operation. I can attest to the fact that some of the clients I work with have done a really good job of maintaining their cost structure. There's not a lot of profit in the place where we are now, but they're still running a profitable operation because they gathered enough data and they concentrated on the little things that have enabled them to be competitive. So they're in that top third. I always say, you know, we got three lines of people and profitability. We got the bottom third that struggle to make any profits, even when times are somewhat good. We got the middle third that hang in there, and then we got the top third that are just exceptionally good managers. And but along with management comes resources. We got some people who are good managers, but they just don't have the best soils, the best resources to work with. And maybe they need to change gears. I had a young man that was in that arena here a number of years ago. He took a lot of the upland that just wasn't seeding very much, and he planted it through some grasses like gamma grass and so forth. He's done a wonderful job of improving the profitability of that poor ground by utilizing his cows to graze different grasses and rotation and stuff. He's figured it out. And I run his numbers every year, and he made $122,000 last year in a time that most of us are struggling. And so it can be done. It just is a matter of what your perspective, what you might want to do. Any questions about the facilitation process, the analyzation? Let me ask this: if you're in this process but you're not quite finished with it, what things are roadblocks that you need to overcome? Is it communication? Is it common goals? There's a lot of things that can impede our progress and not allow us to get as far along as we'd like to. Some of us are on those steps somewhere, and we're striving to get them all completed, but maybe we're not quite there yet. I would encourage you to go home and talk to your families and make a commitment to get it done. Please get it done. One of the things I've had happen several times over the years is I've had an attorney call me and say, well, Dad passed away, the family came in and they read the will, or the estate plan, and now it's a wreck. Because nothing was shared with the kids, and the way things are put together, they're all at each other's throats. And the attorney says, can we use mediation to bring this family together and see if we can find a way of getting things solved, or at least getting them back communicating again. But, have you heard of the Kansas Ag Mediation Service at K-State? Several of you have. Yeah, it's an excellent service. About 50% of the referrals I receive every year come through the CAMS organization, Kansas Ag Mediation Service. And it is there's a toll-free number that you can call and talk to them anytime. There's no charge for that. And what they do is they do a really good job of helping us put together a summary and getting families organized and into a situation where we can have a private with a mediator. I'm not a mediator, I'm an analyst and a neutral party just to give people ideas and analysis. But we have trained mediators throughout the state that work with farm families that can sit down and develop a plan of action for them to get past the frustrations that they're having. They're stuck on one of those steps and they don't know where to go. And this is a really good program. It's been around since, well, it came out of the crisis of the 80s and was formally adopted in 1995. It's mandated by the USDA for adverse decisions. At the USDA, if you have a decision about a wetland or something, or maybe you've applied for a loan to FSA and been denied, this program is mandated by USDA to use mediation before it goes to litigation to try to solve it. We're about 95% successful in getting solving the problem, so we don't end up having to go to litigation. And the process can be somewhat lengthy, but generally it can be solved in 1 or 2 sessions in most cases. And that's because we're facilitating the discussions and helping people see the commonalities, those core values I mentioned earlier, trying to get them all on the same page. And it's really a neat process to see when both parties walk into the room and they're like this, and by the end of the afternoon, they're shaking hands again. Found out that things weren't quite as dire as they thought, and that they can work together and be part of the process that will preserve and maintain that legacy. I know from past experience that a lot of times we have questions that we're maybe not comfortable raising in a group like this, so I'm going to stick around as long as necessary this afternoon to visit with you on an individual basis if I can answer any of your questions. I also have contact information with my business card I'd like you to take, and let me know if there's anything we can do, our group can do to help you. There are 4 of us that are trained to do this across the state. Myself, Lavelle Windsor, who is a young lady that's been working with me about 8 years now. She lives down here in Grantville, farms with her husband down here east of Topeka. I've got Dave Keller, who works out of the Wichita area. And I've got Fred Armstrong, God bless him, he's clear out of Lincoln, out in the western part of the state. And anyway, we try to cover as much as possible. We recognized in the department 3 years ago, and 2 years ago we acted on this, we were going to need more help. I mean, the 4 of us couldn't begin to take care of the needs. So we've got 30 county agents now that have taken training to go out and put together the data to help farm families in doing the financial analysis, helping with that process, and then also referring people to facilitators or whatever they might need. These county agents are going to be needed because we can see the demand is going to escalate. I've talked to some major ag lenders across the state here in the last month, and they're struggling right now to get people to get their operating loans put together for this year. And there's a number of them that are not going to be able to continue to farm if they don't make some decisions pretty quickly about selling some assets and doing something to make it work. We're all about empowering individuals who are faced with a situation that they'd rather not be in to take charge and figure out what do I need to do to make this continue. And so the whole point of our program is we work confidentially with each individual family. That data is never shared with anyone else. And we help promote the opportunity for you to take some of the decisions and analysis and sit down with your lender or find a new lender if necessary and keep in there, keep working and keep in business. With that,
Well, before we wrap up here, Joe from the FSA office would like to make a few comments about FSA program transitioning to CRP.
good.
And Annette will have handouts.
So we've got a couple programs for transitioning CRP. One of them doesn't necessarily pertain too much to transferring it within the family. the other a little more so. Wait a little bit here. So, hand over this out. The first program I'll talk about is the land tenure provisions for CRP contract termination. This is a new program that it just started January of this year. And land that's unrolled under eligible CRP contracts are eligible for termination under land tenure provisions if the land is transferred by sale or lease to own transactions to either of the following: beginning farmer or rancher, or a socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher, including family members. This is limited to just certain CRP practices. It doesn't cover all the practices. We've got a list of them down here. Priority consideration. One thing that's special with this transferring is that the acreage terminated under land tenure provisions will be eligible for priority enrollment considerations into CRP grasslands if they meet eligibility criteria. And this priority, as long as the person who's taken over the land meets the eligibility requirements, they will be accepted into the CRP grasslands. They don't have to, it doesn't matter how many points they have. It's a point system to get into the program. They have the priority, so as long as they're eligible, they can get into the CRP grasslands. They also have priority enrollment consideration for CSP as determined by NRCS, and the EQIP program is determined by NRCS. And in addition, they'll have higher EQIP and CSP payment rates. They also may seek advance payments for practices included in EQIP contracts if they're funded. There are some land that will be ineligible for this transfer, and that's any land that was transferred prior to January 9th, 2017, when the provisions were established. Land that was transferred at any time during the 2017 fiscal year and a succession of interest to a CRP1 has already been completed. Land that's located within an average of 120 feet to a perennial stream or other permanent waterway. Land with a erodibility index of greater than 15. Land that's located within a federally designated wellhead protection area. Land that's covered as an easement under CRP, and land that's currently enrolled in CREP. Some of the general provisions for this program. The CRP participants who are interested, they have to file a CRP 41 form to request the termination under the land tenure provisions. They can request to terminate an entire contract or part of a contract. And if they choose to just go with part of a contract, there will be a measurement service that we can provide for an expense. The effective date of the termination will be the date of the transfer, and there will be a prorated annual payment if the transfer takes effect during the middle of the year. The prorated payment will apply from October 1st through the date of the land sale transfer, and it'll be dispersed after October 1st with the rest of the annual payments. There'll be pay room reductions for noncompliance before the termination under land tenure provisions. There will be some early land preparation provisions. And then land tenure provisions will not affect the ability of the new owner or operator that received the land under land tenure provisions to submit another CRP offer. But if they're just going to re-enroll into CRP, it's suggested that they just accede to the CRP contract that's already in effect. unless they are interested in the CRP grasslands, and since they have the priority, this would be a good route for them to take so they can get in the CRP grassland program. And then there would be conservation programs that have to go along with the transfer. And landowners requesting the land tenure provisions for agricultural purposes should meet with NRCS about the proposed land use for the activities, which may impact their eligibility for USDA benefits. And also participants who are approved for land tenure provisions must maintain an applied conservation system or haying and grazing plan until the effective date of the land tenure provision. And 6CP, which is the highly erodible land and the wetland conservation, those provisions will apply on the acreage terminated under the land tenure provisions if the producer intends to receive certain other USDA benefits. So that program is an early way to terminate your contract without the fees that normally come with it, the payback, liquidation fees. The second program here, the TIP program, is a transition incentive program. This program, so the Agriculture Act of 2014, amended by the Food Security Act of 1985, authorized $33 million for the voluntary transition of land that are enrolled in existing CRP from a retired or retiring owner or operator to a veteran, beginning or socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher to return the land to production for sustainable grazing or crop production. And this is a transition to a veteran, beginning or socially disadvantaged farmer that allows you to receive 2 extra payments after the transition. So you keep your CRP payments for 2 years after it's transferred to this new or disadvantaged farmer. And in order to be eligible, the retired or retiring owner or operator must agree to sell or lease the land for a minimum of 5 years. One thing that's different with this compared to the land tenure provisions is that you will not, if you transfer it within your family, you won't get the 2 rental payments. You can do the TIP program within the family, but you're just ineligible to receive those payments. And then land that is ineligible for this program is current CRP that's under an easement that would prohibit the land from being farmed in a sustainable manner. The sign-up period, you should sign up in a period between 1 year from the contract expiration date, and then between that 1 year and August 15th of the year when the CRP contract is scheduled to expire, or when that 33 million cap is reached. Eligible producers, I've got the definition of what they require for a retired or retiring owner and operator. And a retired or retiring owner and operator is defined as an operator who has ended labor in farming operations as a producer or agricultural crop, or expects to do so within the next 5 years. There was a difference between the 2 programs with the socially disadvantaged. The definition for this TIP program, socially disadvantaged does not cover women. It doesn't cover gender, whereas the land tenure provisions doesn't exclude women. They are considered socially disadvantaged for that program. Yeah, I'm not sure what the difference. They're pretty similar, but yeah. And then there will be a required conservation program that needs to get put in place by the person who's going to be taking over the land and farming. We'll have to work with NRCS to come up with the sustainable grazing and crop production within Sorry, I covered a lot of information real quick. Does anybody have any questions, anything I need to clarify? Well, if anyone has any questions, you're reading over it later, anything you need clarified, you can just give us a call at the FSA office. If you're interested in pursuing the program, just let us know, and we'll be sure to help you out.